Esteban Perez. I am a business advisor with the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Illinois SBDC, or Small Business Development Center. I'm joined by the grand organizer of this webinar, Angie Alonso, one of the directors of one of our programs, if you'd like to discuss it a little more.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Esteban, for being today with me here. And thank you to our speakers. So we are organizing this webinar today to talk about a topic that is really important for all of us, and especially for our business owners, that is mental health. Like Esteban said, my name is Angie Alonso. Thank you for being with us here today. I'm the PTEC director. And just to clarify what PTEC means as Procurement Technical Assistance Center, what we do is we belong to a large nationwide network of 300 centers that help businesses to successfully compete and participate in government contracts. So I won't go in depth about this, but this is what we do. And if you ever need help with government contracting, feel free to reach out to us at IHGC or any help with businesses, also to Esteban that belongs to the SBDC. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today.
Thanks, Angie. Next, we have Cassandra Firkins, who is working with us to organize this webinar and is at Haas with Odalinda. So yeah, could you please introduce yourself, Cassandra?
Yes, Cassandra Firkins. As you mentioned, I work at Healthcare Alternative Systems, HAAS, a program administrator over mental health and domestic violence programming, and also a new program called CST, which stands for Community Support Team, basically doing mental health and case management in the community. And I did a presentation earlier with the staff here, and I'm happy to be back doing another presentation with business owners.
Thanks, Cassandra. And then we have Linda, a program administrator at Haas. And could you please introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted.
Of course. Morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Odalinda. I go by Linda. I'm a program administrator here at Haas. I've been here for a little bit over a year and a half supporting our programs, substance use. So our methadone clinic, our residential program, our transitional housing. I've been in the field for about 20-something years, and a lot of what I do is a lot of Spanish-speaking education, working with parents, a lot of parenting, but a lot of, actually today's topic is one of my passions, just educating the community on mental health and self-care. So we'll get started then. Cassandra and I are very happy to be here to talk about two really important topics. Okay. So here we go. Okay. So most people, as adults, we become really busy. And we center a lot of our time taking care of the needs of others. And sometimes we forget about ourselves. When you're starting a business or you're focusing on building that American dream, it becomes even more a challenge. The line between family, work, and life can be very blurry, sometimes even non-existent, especially during a pandemic like COVID. I invite you to ask yourself, by any chance, do you know someone that's like this, or are we speaking of you? When we continue to work like this, it can be so easy to drain yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally to the point of burnout. The field of mental health believes in the power of self-care and self-love and its benefits on our well-being. So today we're going to be working on, so our objectives for today will be to become familiar with mental health and conditions that are impacting the Latino community, and on ways to kind of identify when someone needs professional help. We'll be talking a little bit about cultural stigma, inequalities and barriers that influence mental health in the community and business owners. And we'll be introducing the importance of self-care. And if we have enough time, hopefully sharing a couple strategies on self-care. Okay. So according to NAMI, the American National Alliance, the National American Alliance of Mental Health, common mental health conditions among the Latinx community are anxiety and stress, depression, trauma, grief and loss, and substance use. Among Latinos who experience symptoms of mental health issues, only about 20% speak to their doctors about what's going on. About 10% actually contact a professional, and about 19 have no form of health insurance, according to a report that was conducted in 2018. Many communities face unique challenges that can make access to mental health care even more difficult for people of color.
So we talk about mental health, and we also talk about mental illness. And sometimes people use both of those words, both of those phrases interchangeably, but there is a distinction. So mental health, next slide, please. So mental health, if we were to give a definition, I think my favorite definition is from mentalhealth.gov. It really, mental health includes your emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, we feel, and we act. And clearly with the pandemic, our social well-being has been greatly affected. And I think when you have one part of your mental health affected, everything gets affected. And so sometimes it's really difficult to have good mental health when other things are going on. But there is a distinction between mental health and mental illness. So mental illness is the next slide. So mental illness can also affect your thinking, your feeling, your mood, and your behavior. But the difference is mental illness tends to be more long-lasting, and it affects how you function every day. And there is, with mental illness, there's often biology involved. Sometimes you can, there's genetics where if you have someone in your family that's depressed, sometimes their children can be depressed. And there's all kinds of mental illness disorders that we talk about, mostly anxiety, depression, personality disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD, which everybody's been hearing a lot about. That basically means that you've had some kind of trauma in your life and it's still really affecting you after the trauma is over with. And then we have psychotic disorders, including schizophrenia. And with that, we know that that is definitely a biology. That is something that impacts the brain, and it's biology that influences schizophrenia. And then substance abuse also can be found to be a mental illness too. It's related to your mental health.
So how does mental health then affect business world? People of color have experienced economical hardship during COVID at a rate between 2 to 3 times greater than white adults. So the impact on your business. Mental health and substance use cost US businesses between 80 to 100 billion annually. Depression is thought to be accounted for about 400 billion lost workdays annually. Approximately 1 in 5 adults in the USA, that's 18.5% of the population, express mental illness this year. And that's according to Forbes magazine in 2019. There's a lot of indirect causes that are associated with mental health as well, particularly loss of productivity. And it seems to also increase costs for a lot of businesses. So in terms of health insurance and pharmacy expenses. According to the World Health Association, consequences of mental health problems in the workplace are, so it's absenteeism, more sick days, it affects work performance, reduction in productivity or outcome, staff attitude and morale, loss of motivation and commitment, a higher turnover, relational issues, more conflict among employees, and poor relationship with the customers or customer service.
Yes, before we move on to the next slide, I know our time is limited, but I just wanted to take a moment to see with the people that are participating, are you seeing this with your businesses? Are you seeing an increase in some of these issues with your employees, especially in relation to COVID? So do we have the ability to have people participate if they have?
Yeah, so to our attendees, if you'd like to participate, you could always, if you hover over your screen, you can click on the chat button at the bottom or the Q&A button. This might be more appropriate just for chat, but you could always use both.
Yeah. So feel free to drop in the chat some of these things that you are seeing in particular. I know my own experience working in social services, we are doing a lot to support other people, but even as Linda was saying at the beginning, even people that are in helping professions are also impacted. So we're seeing some of this increase in difficulties. And so that just puts even more pressure on leaders to figure out how to best support their staff during this time. So I'm glad you're all participating because maybe you'll get a couple ideas.
And as a program administrators, we're responsible to running and supporting a lot of our programs. So we've been spending a lot of time, a lot of intentional effort on speaking about self-care, and then keeping each other accountable, so checking in with each other on, like what are your plans for the weekend? Were you able to do so-and-so activity this weekend? So just kind of being that support for each other.
Yeah. Also just being a role model yourself. So it's one thing if you say, when you leave work at work. But if you're emailing and texting after hours, that kind of shows your staff that you're not really having that time away from work too. So, or if you are a person that likes to exercise or do something for self-care, it's okay to share that with your staff because you're a role model to them. And if you're doing something that's good for you, maybe they'll try it. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please.
Sure. Okay. So the Latinx in mental health. This we're talking about how then our culture kind of influence mental health. One big one is stigma. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. I think more in particular about mental illness. There's this negative perceptions. I think a lot of people are still concerned about el qué dirán, what are people going to say, and then kind of that mentality of what happens in a home to, se lava la ropa sucia en la casa. So kind of, whatever issues are going on, they remain here in the home and we'll deal with it, together. There's a lack of insurance or underinsurance. Even though a lot of the Latino families are working, we have insurance. I still feel like, sometimes it's, do I pay my bill or do I pay my copay to go to treatment? So we need to kind of address some of these barriers. Language barriers and poor cultural understanding by a therapist. So not having enough Latino, bicultural, bilingual clinicians to see enough the people that need help. There's still a fear of agencies and entities. So working with the undocumented population, there's still a fear of deportation or that we're going to share that information with, some state entities. Sometimes the lack of education and just pervasive poverty can also be a barrier to treatment. There's a shortage, we don't have enough mental health professionals, especially right now in this pandemic. Mental health services we have waiting lists that we haven't seen in many, many years. The level of prisons acculturation. So there's a lot of research actually indicating that the longer people are here in the United States, for some reason, there's more of an increase in mental health issues. We're also a culture that believes in other remedies. So we're looking at folklore, or religious or magical healing. We're really big on, we'll go consult with a curandero before we go seek help, or using a lot of, herbs, so el hierbero, or using religion sometimes, to help us with mental health issues. Okay. We also rely on each other, or extended family and the church. And that's where many times we seek the support is with our family or with the priest at church. There's a lack of awareness about mental health issues, resources, and services. So that's why it's really good that we're doing this here today, just talking about something that's very important. And I know that the city is actually trying to promote more mental health education with the Latino community. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll see a little bit more initiatives. Gender roles also can be a barrier. We're a culture where, our pride, male pride sometimes gets into, is a barrier for treatment, or the women that we have this idea that we need to self-sacrifice and it's okay, or this guilt about having to take care of ourselves. So just briefly, this is an intro of some barriers and obstacles for why sometimes people do not seek treatment. Okay. So the body and mind connection. The body and mind are connected. So sometimes the state of mind affects what goes on with the physical health. So when there's changes of hormones like stress, it really impacts the body, and it can lead to many chronic illnesses. So sometimes we have people, complaining of headaches, and it can be underlying anxiety or depression. People dealing with stomach issues, again, stress, anxiety, eating disorder, possibly anger. So just an example of many sometimes physical symptoms that are, can be associated with underlying issues. So I know that many times people go to the doctor, and they go to you see this especially with kids, with younger kids, the headache or the stomach ache, and they don't want to go to school. They go to the nurse, they go to the doctor, and response is, there's nothing wrong with you. It's called you don't have anything phenomenon, right? So then many times what's going on, it's not a physical issue. It might be more of emotional. It can be something mental. Cassandra, do you want to talk a little bit more about the nervous system and the stress response?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. So, we are built to handle stress. And when we are faced with a threat, our body goes into that response of, I'm going to keep myself safe, and I'm either going to fight back, or I'm going to flee, which is the flight response. Or sometimes more rare is sometimes we freeze. So these are all very helpful when you actually have a threat coming at you. The example a lot of times they give is, if you have a wild animal coming towards you, you need to be able to respond. And this is something that, our ancestors had to do. But now we aren't faced with those actual threats, but we have threats in our environment that are more like emotional and psychological, and it still triggers that same kind of response in our body. And whenever we have that kind of response, our heart rate goes up. Sometimes our blood pressure goes up. And if we're in a constant state of, stress like that, of course, it's going to affect your nervous system and then the rest of your body. So yeah. And sometimes, you have that constant feeling of being stressed, almost like you've had too much coffee. It's that constant anxiety kind of stress that you have. And it's really hard to manage that if that's what you're feeling all the time. And so when we talk about self-care, we are talking about taking a break literally and physically from that stress response. And you know, people talk about the deep breathing and they say, well, it doesn't really help, or how is that going to help? And I guarantee if you do that and you do it in the way that, you know, the deep breath in and the deep breath out, it does change something in your body. It doesn't take away the stress. It doesn't take away what you're dealing with, but it helps your body just take a break from it. So we're going to hopefully get a chance to do something with you before the end of the presentation with that.
So with that, Cassandra's gonna continue then talking about COVID and stress.
Yeah, so I started talking about that a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just spend a little bit more time. So so I've been working with mental health and treating mental illness for a long time. And as Linda said, we have seen an increase in people wanting to get help with it and needing to get help with it, and wait lists everywhere. But if I were to kind of pull back and take a broader view of it, in some ways, I'm glad that more people are talking about it. And I hope more people are able to get help with it, not just during a pandemic, but in general. Because, you know, if you're able to manage your anxiety and stress, it makes for a better business, it makes for a better leader, and it makes for a better staff. But next slide, please. With COVID, I think we can talk about all the different mental illnesses that are on the rise right now, but I wanna stop and pause and talk about grief. And when we think about grief, most of the time we think about grief when we lose someone to death or illness. And it does have to do with that, but also grief has to do with loss in general. And with COVID, of course, we're dealing with loss of life and loss of loved ones, but there are so many other losses. There's loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of social connection, and the list goes on and on. And when you're dealing with so many losses at once, it is really challenging to maintain your mental health. One of the best ways to help you process loss, believe it or not, is to talk about it. And I know we often feel like if we talk about it, it's going to make it worse, or I'll experience all those feelings and I don't want to, you know, let go of all that. But talking about it is one of the best ways to manage grief. And if you don't have someone that you trust in your life, believe it or not, a therapist can be a person that you can go and have your own time to talk about what you're experiencing. And just like when you do the deep breathing, it doesn't necessarily change what's happening, but it helps you just be able to manage that for the moment. And the same thing can happen when you're able to talk things through.
There's actually a lot of self-help grief support groups. So it's just a matter maybe of looking them up. There's Spanish speaking support groups as well. And they're very, very, very useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're able to be in a group with other people and you can relate to them and they can relate to you. And then you don't feel so alone in what you're experiencing. And in addition to grief, I've heard the headlines, I'm sure you've heard the headlines that there's an increase in alcohol sales since the pandemic started. There's an increase in drug use since the pandemic started. So human beings are gonna do what they can to manage stress, and we will do whatever it takes to manage that stress. And sometimes people do turn to substance use. And, you know, alcohol oftentimes can, you know, calm, if someone's got a lot of anxiety, it can sometimes kind of calm that. And other drugs can kind of raise up your energy level. And a lot of times people are using alcohol and drugs to deal with symptoms of mental illness or symptoms of stress. So, you know, sometimes getting help, professional help with those symptoms often results in not needing to use substance, alcohol and drugs.
Okay. So these are called cultural bound syndromes. They're culturally acceptable labels for mental and somatic changes. So I'm sure growing up, we've probably heard these terms in our home. So there are significant comorbidity with depression, anxiety, panic, and stress. So if we look at each of them, I'm sure we can kind of all relate them back to like, oh, you know, angustia it can be anxiety, it can be stress, but somehow they're more acceptable, I think, in Latino homes, in our language. But, you know, so these are just going to be on the lookout for when people are using these terms. Okay.
And I just want to double check, do we have until 10:30 or do we have flexibility?
We have a little bit more time if you need it so
Okay.
far. Yeah.
Okay, we won't take too much more time. When to seek help. So when to seek help, we've kind of referred to this a little bit when I've mentioned the benefits of therapy, but these are some things that you can look for in yourself, in your family and friends, and in your staff. Changes in diet and sleep schedules, either eating too much or not enough, sleeping too much or not enough, inability to cope with problems or activities of daily living. This often happens, I've seen this happen a little bit when people are saying, you know, I just need to go home for the rest of the day. And it's challenging because as leaders, we want to support people taking care of themselves, but you know, it's also a sign that your staff is struggling. And so allowing them to go home, but then the next day trying to talk with them about what's happening and what is their plan to help themselves be able to manage is a good thing to try to do. And because we are kind of mindful of time, I'm not going to necessarily read through all of these because I think we've already addressed this. But it's challenging when you are managing staff and they have kind of difficult behaviors. So one thing to think about is what is going on with their mental health. And it's a nice way to help you, you know, be able to manage it as a leader and be able to kind of show concern. And I've got some questions coming up in another slide that you might use to ask staff to kind of get at what's going on with them. And as we've been referencing self-care, so I think people, when they hear self-care, they think of a picture of someone like getting a massage or, you know, sitting on a beach somewhere, but self-care does not have to cost any money and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's more of a mindset. You know, each day I'm going to try to do something just for me, or I'm going to try to do something that's good for me. And it can be as easy as stepping outside at your lunch break and letting the sun be on your face for 5 minutes. It's a little harder when it's cold like this, but the sun is out today. So if you can, let the sun be on your face. And by the way, vitamin D helps with depression. So it's not selfish to do self-care. In fact, one of my favorite things when I'm talking about self-care is when we used to be able to fly on airplanes, they would have that whole thing about if something happens, the oxygen mask comes down. You need to put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping someone else. And it seems like counterintuitive, like I should help someone else first. But what happens if you help that other person and you don't have the oxygen? You end up passing out. And so let's put the mask on for ourselves so that we're better able to help other people. And in the interest of time, we're not going to necessarily do questions about what you do to take care of yourself. But if you would like, feel free to drop it in the chat box. I know for myself, exercise is key for me. I try to do exercise every day as my form of self-care. Linda, how about you? What do you do for self-care?
I'm very like you. I need to do something physical. So running and yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
It should be on mindfulness.
Yeah, let's look at mindfulness.
Okay.
Still says self-care for me.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah.
so I'm going to keep talking, but eventually the slides will catch up. So one thing I was mentioning, another form of self-care is something called mindfulness. And you probably have heard people talking about mindfulness. What is this mindfulness thing? Basically, there it is, paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And one of the most simple exercises that I've taught people about mindfulness, and you can do this today, is focus on your 5 senses. And when you're first doing mindfulness, just focus on one of your 5 senses. For example, when you leave work today, focus on what you are hearing. What are 2 things that you're hearing? And really try to focus on that and not the noise in your head and not your to-do list. Just for even 5 minutes, what are 2 sounds that I hear? And get curious and think about those 2 sounds and then go back to your normal chatter in your head. You can do that with smell. You can do that with sight. One of my favorite things to do at a stoplight is kind of just, if there's a tree, just kind of focus on the tree. It can run into problems sometimes. I do get honked at sometimes, but it still is kind of a break just in the traffic, just to take a look at a tree and wonder about the tree.
I like the one with the taste, so with your taste, a piece of candy or the food, just being mindful of the flavors, that's a really good one too.
Yeah, because we often eat without thinking and then we don't enjoy it as much. And yeah, so that's a really good one. Especially like a piece of fruit is always good, like oranges, and when you're peeling it and the smell and all that, it's really a great thing to eat. Okay, next slide. So here's those questions that I was referring to. I can't remember, Linda, if we decided I was gonna, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go. So here's some questions that you can ask your staff. How has the pandemic affected your sense of safety? If it has, what can we do to help? And so even if you can't do what they want you, like if they come up with a solution that is just not realistic, it's okay. We just want to, hear what they think. And it's amazing when you ask someone what they think and they offer you that idea or tell you what they think, even if you can't do what they're suggesting, they still feel better because you've asked them what they think. Do you have any concerns about being able to handle what's going on in your life, deal with your stress, or do your work? Sometimes people are worried about asking too many personal questions, but I think this question is okay. It's not too personal. It's a little more vague, and you can focus on it in terms of their work. What are some things that you've done to cope that have been really helpful in the past or been helpful recently? And that has to do with the self-care question we asked all of you. And what else could we do that would help? So the thing I like about these questions, there is some accountability for you there. As a business owner, there are some things that, they're going to ask of you, but I like that these are questions that are encouraging your staff to think about what is it that they can do? What are their ideas? Because I think sometimes our staff become kind of dependent on us to solve everything. And when you ask some of these questions, some of the staff have really good ideas that you haven't thought about. So I always find that this is helpful. And I think right now, time and money are very hard. They're in short supply right now. But it is amazing, even spending 15 minutes talking to a staff member can make all the difference, especially if you're giving them your undivided attention. A little goes a long way when it comes to listening to what people are feeling. The last bit is, as we talked about, if there are people that you're concerned about that need additional help, clearly Haas can be here for you. But also there's, if they go to psychologytoday.com, there's a really great way that they can search for a therapist, and they search by insurance, by location, by gender, by the different issues the therapist treats. And it's a really nice resource to give your staff. But as I said, we also offer so many services. And I thought maybe we would have someone come in at the end of our presentation, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Linda, do you know if that's happening today?
No, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Okay, so do you want to, do we want to take time to talk about our services, or do we need to just have you look on our website or contact us if you have questions?
Well, real quick, there's a question. We had a question from Lennox Jackson. Just because we're already on the topic of the different kinds of support you could get.
Okay.
She's asking if there are any therapy groups where people are business owners. She says she would like to share specific concerns that stem from her being a business owner.
Mm-hmm. So off the top of my head, I don't know, but I wrote that question down when it popped up, and I'm going to look into it and research it. Linda, do you know of any off the top of your head?
I do not. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, we're going to research it, and we will, should we email one of the facilitators the information?
Yeah,
Okay.
you could email one of us, and then we'll include it in our email blast to everyone that attended.
Sure. I
Thank
will look
you.
into that, and I will get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Lennox. And if we have a little bit of time, so if you'd like to go over some of the programs that you offer, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. Okay, well, I'll start. We offer mental health services, which individual counseling. Mostly we're working with adults, but if you have a teen, there are a few of our therapists that have maybe a teenager on their caseload. You know, as Linda was saying, we have wait lists, but our wait lists aren't as long as other places, so feel free to have them reach out. And then in addition to mental health services, if someone has domestic violence, if they're dealing with that right now, or if they ever had that in the past, we have a free program where they can come and get support, and they can participate in support groups. If they need an order of protection, we can help them with that. It's absolutely free. It's all grant funded. And then we also have the other side of domestic violence is we actually do have groups for people that have abused other people, or they have some kind of criminal involvement with that. And those groups are really helpful to help them really look at what they have done and understand it and try to do something different in the future. A lot of times those folks are referred to us through their probation officer or through DCFS. And then we have, like I was saying earlier, community support team, which is a team of a therapist, a case manager, and they help people that have a lot of needs. They might need someone to take them actually to the doctor, or take them to get, benefits, and then also provide therapy for them in the comfort of their own home or in a community setting. And then Linda, you want to talk about
the living room as well?
The living room. Yeah, sorry. The living room. Okay, the living room is something that's going to be really helpful. The living room is open from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. And we have 2 locations, one on Fullerton Avenue and one in Broadview, the suburb of Chicago. And basically, it's a walk-in center that is staffed by a therapist and also a peer support specialist who has lived experience with mental illness. And it is a place that someone can go if they just need to talk to someone, or if they are really, really struggling and wondering if they should go to the hospital. This is a place they can go instead of going to the ER. if they're experiencing a mental health crisis. And sometimes if they go to living room, it can help them get connected quicker with services. If they go there and they need therapy, the living room staff can help them find a therapist, help them find those resources. Absolutely free, no appointment necessary. And it's offered in English and Spanish. Also, our therapy is offered in English and Spanish. And the domestic violence program is English and Spanish as well.
We do, I think Haas is mainly known for substance use treatment. We do have prevention services for youth. We're in some of the city of Chicago schools. We're also working at one of, at the Fort Proviso township schools, high schools. We have outpatient services, DUI services. We have recovery coach support. So they're out in the community helping people with their recovery. We have a 28-day treatment, and then we have a 5-month program for transitional living. The residential and the transitional living facilities are for males only. Am I missing anything, Cassandra?
Well, we have groups for substance abuse.
Mhm.
What we call intensive outpatient, which is multiple times a week. And then they drop down, once they complete that, they can go to outpatient, which is, I think, 1 or 2 times a week. And then
It's
even
once a week.
once a week. And then aftercare, which is once a month. So right now, a lot of those groups are online and virtual. And they help people work through learning other ways to manage stress instead of relying on alcohol and drugs. I think that covers most of what we do.
Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, it doesn't seem like we have any other questions in the chat. So, Angie, unless you wanted to cover something else, I think we are good to sign off. You're muted, by the way, Angie.
Yeah, of course. And no, I just want to say thank you to Linda and Cassandra. This is a very important topic for all of us. I think with the pandemic in the last year, we all felt like at some point we needed help or talking to somebody. And I'm sure for our business owners was even harder because they feel responsible for their staff. And so the load of stress is even bigger. I'm glad that we have the chance to do this webinar, and that we have some business owners learning about some services and programs available out there, and understanding that even when we are sometimes the business owner or the mom in the house, we have to put our mask on first, because that is really hard to understand for all of us. So just thank you for all of the information, great tips here. I think that program that you mentioned about the living room is wonderful. I've never heard of it. I think having a place instead of going to the emergency room when you're feeling a moment of crisis is key, because sometimes the emergency room doesn't really help in those moments, and you just need to de-escalate and get it out, and having somewhere and somebody to speak is very important. So thank you for all of that, and we hope that this information was helpful for our participants. So if there are no other questions, I think we are okay to say goodbye, and happy Friday to everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
Friday, and I'll make sure to get that resource to you about the support group.
Yeah.
Thank
And to
you.
all our attendees, we're going to be sending a copy or a recording of this webinar as well as the presentation. So thanks,
Yes,
everyone.
and we have some handouts that Cassandra and Linda prepare for the attendees as well. So with a lot more information about this topic. So thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.